Dragons have inhabited humanity's collective imagination for thousands of years. Sometimes they appear as symbols of fear, darkening the sky with their wings, and sometimes as representations of wisdom, power, and prosperity. From the clay tablets of Mesopotamia to the imperial palaces of China, from the medieval legends of Europe to the myths of the indigenous peoples of the Americas, these legendary creatures appear in many forms across different cultures. Their origins reflect humanity's relationship with the unknown and with its own inner fears. Have you ever wondered about the stories of dragons, which are depicted simultaneously as both destructive and protective, sometimes representing chaos and at other times symbolizing justice? Where did they originate? How did they spread? And why do they continue to fuel our imagination across generations? The earliest appearances of dragons in human history can be traced back to Mesopotamia, one of the world's oldest civilizations. In these accounts, a creature called the Mushushu, covered in scales with eagle talons and a serpent's tongue, symbolized the power of the god Marduk and the defeat of the chaos goddess Tiamat. It was not just a monster, but also a representation of cosmic order and authority. Similarly, in Persian mythology, Azdaha, or Ajihidhaka, appeared as a symbol of evil and misfortune, intertwined with Zahak's shoulders, representing humanity's struggle against darkness. Along the Nile, Egypt's colossal serpent deity Apep attacked the sun god Ra, enacting the endless battle between light and darkness. In this way, dragon-like beings became integral to narratives of cosmic balance and human struggle against fate. In different corners of the ancient world, dragons acquired their own cultural meanings. In Greek mythology, massive serpents and dragons such as the Hydra, Typhon, or Ladon posed obstacles that heroes had to overcome. Heracles' battle with the Hydra, or Jason's defeat of the dragon guarding the Golden Fleece, transformed the terrifying power of these creatures into epic trials. During the Roman period, the word Draco evolved from referring to large serpents to dragons, giving new dimensions to the monster motif. While Western traditions often depicted dragons as antagonistic and evil, Eastern cultures saw them as harmonious and benevolent. In the Indian subcontinent, dragons appeared as semi-divine, serpent-like beings known as Nagas. Sometimes portrayed as human, sometimes as serpents, they were said to inhabit caves, underground regions, and water sources. In texts such as the Mahabharata and Puranas, Naga kings like Shesha, Vasuki, and Takshaka played significant roles. Notably, Vasuki served as the rope during the churning of the ocean of milk by gods and demons, indicating their central position in maintaining cosmic order. On the other hand, the dragon Vritra, personifying drought, was vanquished by Indra with a thunderbolt, linking dragons in India to natural phenomena, especially rain and fertility. This understanding spread to Southeast Asia as well. In the Philippines, the dragon Bakunawa was believed to cause eclipses, swallowing the moon with its tail and roaming the seas and skies. Similarly, in Laos, Cambodia, and Thailand, Nagas were portrayed as protectors of rivers and rice fields. Here, the dragon figure reflected human concerns about water and sustenance. In Europe, dragon narratives took on a different dimension. The snake-like creatures of ancient Greece evolved into massive, winged, fire-breathing beings during the Middle Ages. With the spread of Christianity, dragons became symbols of Satan. and evil. The story of St. George slaying the dragon was not just a tale of heroism, but also an allegory of good triumphing over evil. In Germanic and Norse myths, treasure-guarding dragons like Fafnir represented human trials of greed and ambition. Serpent-like creatures called Worm by the Anglo-Saxons and Orn by the Norse eventually transformed in Western art and folklore into four-legged, winged, fire-breathing dragons. In this way, dragons became the quintessential adversaries in Western hero tales, living in the shadows of castle towers, manuscript illustrations, and church-stained glass as the most tangible symbols of evil. When discussing dragons, one cannot overlook Beowulf, one of the most important epics in English literature. Beowulf was the story that marked a turning point in how dragons were imagined in European culture, as treasure-hoarding, fire-breathing creatures whose death closed the door on an era. Years earlier, a young warrior named Beowulf arrived on the shores of Denmark and defeated Grendel by tearing off his arm with his bare hands. When he could not defeat Grendel's mother in her underwater lair with the sword Hrunting, given to him by Elfhere, he found an ancient sword hanging on the wall, forged for giants, and used it to separate her head from her body. The way the sword melted like acid and turned to silver in her blood was seen as an ominous sign. As his fame spread, fate was preparing him for an entirely different finale. About 50 years later, Beowulf had become a king, ruling the land of Getland over a disciplined but weary peace. The fame he had earned in his youth had come at the cost of profound loneliness. Then a chain of disaster began when a slave, seeking shelter from fear, entered the stone galleries beneath a mound and stole a small cup from the hoard the dragon had accumulated over centuries. The cup was actually a crystallized memory of all the people's past wars, plunders, and treaties. Even a single loss disrupted a 100-year-old order. Awakened from its slumber, the dragon seemed enraged over the imbalance in time it had guarded. It ravaged villages with fire, reducing homes and treasures to ashes, reminding humans of the law of fire. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Beowulf chose to act not as a king, but as a warrior. He had a wider shield forged, resistant to fire. Though he had once slain monsters with his bare hands, he now knew he would fight against fire. When he reached the dragon's mound with his loyal companions, the heat from the cave's mouth nearly boiled the salt from the sea. Drawing his old sword, Naegling, Beowulf entered, and in the shadows, the gleam of a bygone era reflected off the dragon's scales like gold. In the first strike, Beowulf swung with all his strength, but Naegling, weary from age, could not withstand the blow. The steel cracked, hope faltered, and a wave of fire engulfed them. At that moment, the young Wiglaf advanced. While other warriors recoiled in fear, Wiglaf honored the bond of Comitatus, holding his shield in front of the king, breaking the dragon's fire, and with Beowulf finding a narrow opening to thrust a spear into the beast's belly. Beowulf gathered his remaining strength, slashed the dragon's throat with a dagger, and the fire died down. The sounds in the mound crackled like burning wood falling to ash. The battle was over, but the victory was tinged with sorrow. The poison had already entered the king's veins. As Beowulf had promised, he left one last victory to his people, but his body grew heavy and his breath shallow. As both Beowulf and the treasures were buried, the dragon was also consigned to the earth. The curse of the hoard was unbroken, for no one could truly claim it. Beowulf, as Nejdunhas in the legends, became the first real fire-breathing treasure guardian in myth, reflecting our ambitions, the limits of human life, and the desire for fame. This tale demonstrated in the medieval mindset that dragons were not merely physical foes, but also representations of fate, death, and the unstoppable passage of time. Beowulf's fight with the dragon remains one of the most tragic and unforgettable scenes of heroism and mortality in Western literature. In the Norse world, dragons also held deep significance. In the Volsunga saga, Sigurd's killing of Fafnir is one of the most famous examples. Fafnir was originally a dwarf, but transformed into a dragon out of greed and an insatiable desire for treasure. He abandoned humanity to protect his hoard, turning his soul into that of a monster. Guided by Odin, Sigurd drove his sword into Fafnir's heart, killing him. Yet this victory marked the start of a tragic curse, as the treasure brought betrayal, blood and death into Sigurd's life. Tasting Fafnir's blood and understanding the language of birds, Sigurd gained wisdom, but even that could not alter his fate. In China, dragons occupied an entirely different role. They were neither symbols of evil nor enemies to be slain by heroes. In Chinese legends spanning millennia, dragons were masters of water, celestial beings who brought rain, symbols of prosperity, and emblems of imperial power. During dynastic periods, emperors identified with dragons, legitimizing the throne as part of the cosmic order. The dragon kings of the four seas represented seasons and directions in colorful forms in the popular imagination. The blue dragon of the east and spring, the red dragon of the south and summer, the black dragon of the north and winter, the white dragon of the west and autumn, and the yellow dragon at the center, embodying cosmic balance and the emperor himself. In Chinese art, temple decorations, and ceremonial parades, dragon motifs flow like water. Dancing dragon figures symbolized the blessings that people expected from the heavens. In Turkish mythology, the dragon motif appears as Ejderha, or, in older sources, as a cosmic being. Often depicted as a protector of water and fertility, or as a colossal creature traversing the skies, dragons were associated with thunder and rain in Altai and Central Asian narratives. Sometimes they controlled rivers and lakes, sometimes resided within mountains, and appeared as sacred forces. In the Manas epic and other Turkish epics, dragons posed significant challenges to heroes who proved their valor and saved their communities by defeating them. In these stories, dragons were both adversaries and sources of harmony with nature, rain, and prosperity. In Anatolian folklore, dragons threaten villages, but are ultimately overcome by the hero's courage. Unlike Western portrayals of evil monsters, the Turkish dragon aligns more closely with Eastern concepts of natural power and cosmic balance. Across the Atlantic, dragon-like figures also appear in the indigenous cultures of the Americas. In North America, horned serpents feature in many tribal myths, associated with thunder, rain, and lightning, sometimes dwelling in deep lakes or appearing as omens from the sky. On the Mississippi River, the Alini people carved winged dragon-like figures into rock art, depicting creatures both fearsome and sacred. In Central America, the Aztec Quetzalcoatl and the Mayan Kukulkan are feathered serpents representing celestial wisdom and gifts of civilization. In the Andes, Inca and Tiwanaku myths feature the two-headed serpent Amaruca, sometimes soaring to the sky, sometimes guarding underground portals, standing at the threshold between the world of spirits and humans. The widespread and independent emergence of dragon legends raises the question, why have humans imagined such creatures? One leading theory suggests that ancient fossil finds, dinosaur bones or remains of giant prehistoric animals, were interpreted as evidence of dragons. Another theory views dragons as composites of known predators: Komodo dragons in Asia, giant crocodiles in Africa, or snakes-inspired fear that evolved in the collective imagination into winged, fire-breathing monsters. Evolutionary psychology offers a deeper explanation. Humans coexisted for millions of years with predatory birds, big cats, and venomous snakes, developing heightened vigilance for survival. The dragon image can be seen as a synthesis of three primal fears: the talons of a predatory bird, the fangs of a big cat, and the venom of a snake, into a single entity. Another perspective links dragons to natural phenomena. Ancient people may have imagined massive serpents or dragons to explain thunderstorms, lightning, rainbows, or eclipses. While these theories cannot provide a definitive answer, they reveal how humans have used imagination to make cosmic sense of the unknown. In modern times, dragons have transcended myth to permeate culture. Once symbols of evil in medieval stained glass and manuscripts, dragons became increasingly detailed and dramatic in Renaissance art. In the 19th century, rediscovered European folklore introduced dragons into children's storybooks. In the 20th century and beyond, literature and cinema elevated them further. Tolkien's The Hobbit presents Smaug as a treasure-guarding monster and a personification of greed and pride. In George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, dragons are political and military forces shaping kingdoms' fates. In films, animations, and games, dragons appear as both terrifying foes and charming companions. Works like How to Train Your Dragon or Eragon illustrate this transformation. And games, dragons appear as both terrifying foes and charming companions. Works like How to Train Your Dragon or Eragon illustrate this transformation. Even science entertains playful debates about dragons. Whether a fire-breathing dragon could exist biologically, or if its wings could generate enough lift to fly. Dragons are a figure that appeals simultaneously to childhood wonder and academic curiosity, carrying layered meanings over thousands of years. Today, they remain one of the most powerful mythological symbols, continuing to inspire imagination in all their grandeur. If you enjoyed this video, you can support it by leaving a like, enriching it with your comments, and subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. See you in the next video.